Hi everyone, it's Mr. Smith again, this time looking at language paper 2. Going through the hints and tips for the paper and talking you through my thought process as I would answer this paper as well. So to begin with, same again, your front cover will look like this, very similar to paper 1. You do the usual things first, so centre number, candidate number, surname, forename and sign. And again, this paper is split up into two sections. You've got section A, which is the reading section, and section B, which is the writing section. This paper differs in that there are two extracts to look at. One of them will be a modern text, and one of them will be a 19th century text. And then there will also be a writing to argue or persuade for your question 5. But just like the other paper, there are 40 marks available for question 5, so that is where we'll be starting our exam with the 40 mark question 5. So, just need to find it first, which proving difficult clearly. There we go. So, for this question, you will get given a statement, and it will say something similar to this. So, holidays don't need to be far away or expensive, they just need to give people a break from everyday life and the chance to relax. Write an article for a magazine in which you argue your point of view on this statement. Now, you could be asked to write an article, as this one does. You could be asked to write a blog. You could be asked to write a speech. You could be asked to write a letter. Each of them have different forms, and you have to make sure that you show that you understand those forms. So, for example, this one, which is a magazine article, you would need to make sure you have a headline and a byline. If you were to write a speech, you would be using terms like hello, welcome all to my speech. And if it was a letter, you would be saying dear, whoever, and then you would be signing it off yours sincerely. Be careful to read the question carefully. A couple of years ago, we had a question that was write a letter to a magazine editor. How confusing is that? But it was a letter structure that you needed to do. Lots of people fell into the trap of creating a magazine article. It's not the end of the world if that happens. You don't necessarily lose marks, but there are marks that you wouldn't get for not following the correct form and purpose. So, again, this question is split up into 24 marks for your content and 16 marks for your technical accuracy. Your content should include, same as the last time, sentence variety, so SV flashcode, advanced vocabulary, AV flashcode, advanced punctuation, AP flashcode, and writer's methods, WM flashcode. We need to be looking for this one though, instead of the metaphors and similes. Although they can be used, we should also be looking to include things like facts, statistics, rhetorical questions, anecdotes, etc., etc. I would also, for this question, encourage you to use ethos, pathos, and logos that you studied in Year 8, and you've also had another recap of this year as well. For this question, I would make sure that you are thinking about your own opinion and really trying to get that across to the audience or to the reader or to the examiner. I would plan the question, give yourself 5 minutes to plan, just like last time. Again, I've marked thousands of these. I've never ever read a good one that hasn't been planned first. I personally tell my classes to start with an anecdote, but as long as you start with a method of some sort, so anaphora or a allusion or something along those lines, then you are starting off on a good stead. Your first paragraph, I believe, should be a method, and usually I say to do an anecdote. I would then finish my argument referring back to that same method. So that could be that same allusion, or it could be that same bit of anaphora, or it could be that same anecdote. Only after your full argument, you'll be able to kind of see the other side of this. You'll kind of be able to further this story if it's an anecdote, or repeat the anaphora if it is anaphora. In your middle of your paragraphs, you should be looking for 5 paragraphs altogether on this. The anecdote, introduction, or whatever method you decide to use in your introduction, introducing your argument. You should have an ethos paragraph, a pathos paragraph, and a logos paragraph. Or if you want to do it slightly differently, you just have 3 different argument points for your argument, 3 different ideas. The 4th paragraph or the 5th paragraph, depending on how many you've done so far, could then be a counter argument. But it's incredibly important that if you include a counter argument, you prove that why that counter argument is wrong. You want the reader to realise that your point of view, your argument is completely correct, and even if other people have other opinions, yours is the best one, and you want to get that across in your counter argument. Finally, you would finish with a conclusion paragraph as well. On your technical accuracy side, you should, like I say, sentence variety falls under that as well. You should be looking to use standard English. You should be making sure that you reread your work to make sure it makes sense. Make sure you have punctuated it correctly, that you have used capital letters where they are required, full stops where they are required, and spelling is incredibly important as well. If you are somebody who's sat there thinking, well, I can't spell, what I suggest to my classes is if you learn how to spell the keywords correctly, the advanced vocabulary terms, then you are on to a winner for that. Okay, so that's question 5 sorted. You would then go on to reading the 2 extracts. There would be source A and there would be source B. In this instance, source A is a 21st century extract, source B is 19th century. It could be the other way around, but it doesn't really matter which way around it is. So to begin with in the exam, I would read source A first, and the reason for that is that question 1 only refers to source A. So read source A first. It's the same as last time. That box at the top there is just kind of giving you an idea of what the extract is about. That is not to be used for your analysis or for any of your answers. For anything that is including answers, you start from line 1, which is identified for you there on the left-hand side of the page, line 1. Okay, so back to the question paper then. We'll scroll up to question 2. Sorry, question 1. So question 1 asks you to identify 4 true statements from the list below. I would make sure that you are highlighting the focus of this question, the focus of each of these true statements, and making sure that you know that you've seen them in the extract. This question is slightly trickier than language paper 1 because they can be implied as well as explicit. So it doesn't have to say it exactly in the paragraph, so lines 1 to 9 in this case. It can be implied by the paragraph. So that's why it makes it a little bit more difficult. You need to read lines 1 to 9 a little bit more carefully to make sure you're getting the correct answers. I also like to draw your attention to what it's asking you to do here. So it's asking you to shade the circles in the boxes of the ones that you think are true. If you think that you've got the wrong one, you want to change your answer, make sure that you put a cross in the whole box and then circle another box. The reason why that's important is because this question is the only question on both papers that is marked by a computer. So there is not a person there on the other end of this exam for this question alone that can kind of understand what you've done. It is marked by a computer, so it will be done very kind of to the letter. Okay, we're then on to question 2. For this one, you need to refer to source A and source B. So at this point, I would spend some time reading source B. At this stage, I would have given you around 8 minutes, again, to read the two extracts and to answer question 1. In that 8 minutes, you should then be getting on to question 2 and starting to read source B. Question 2 says you details from both sources to write a summary of what you understand about the differences between the 2 camping sites. One thing that is incredibly important that people always do wrong for this question is that it is asking you about something very, very specific. Sometimes the extracts can be about, say, they could be about trains, but the question will actually ask you about something more specific than just trains. It will be about how old they are, how new they are, who's riding them, etc. It will be a very specific question. So you must underline the focus of the question or highlight the focus of the question. For this one, it is the differences between the 2 camping sites. Although this says it's a summary, it's actually not a summary of the sources, it's a summary of the differences. So you need to be able to identify how these 2 things are different, because that is what he's asking you for, differences. In order to fill out your answer, you need to be using comparative language. So things like, on the other hand, therefore, in this instance, etc. Differently, etc., etc. Using those and putting them into your paragraphs is incredibly important to show that you understand there are differences. You also need to make an inference about the quotes that you select. So the structure you should go with is a point. So you can make a point about this, a clear focus statement. So in source A, the writer is discussing how the campsite is nice and clean. Then you'd put a quote to prove that, and then you would put inference. You can't just repeat what you've put in your clear focus. It needs to be something a little bit more interesting, a little bit more reading between the lines. What's it telling us about the campsite? What's the writer trying to get across about this campsite? And then in source B, you would find a difference. How is that campsite different? And you'd follow the same process. Again, comparative language is incredibly important. Okay, you would then be moving on to question 3. Now, question 3 on paper 2 uses exactly the same skills as question 2 on paper 1, and that is your language analysis skills. You should follow the same process. So highlight the focus of the question. In this case, we're looking at source A. We're looking at specific lines, 29 to 38. Highlight that. Find on your extract. And then the question says, how does the writer use language to describe the rain and the storm? Highlight rain and the storm. You then need to think about what impression you get of the rain and the storm. Is it aggressive? Is it overpowering? Is it calming? Just find what impression you believe, and then find 2 quotations that prove this. Or 3 quotations, should I say. 2 or 3 quotations that prove this. For that, again, it's the same as paper 1. You should be looking for semantic field. Can you find 2 or 3 adjectives or verbs or nouns from the same semantic field that give you an impression? Then the next step is connotations. What connotations do your words have? What are they telling you as the reader? Again, for this question, something people always forget, it is incredibly important to think about what you think, feel, and imagine. You are the reader, so what is this extract making you think, feel, and imagine? The quotes that you've chosen, what are they making you think, feel, or imagine? Okay. You then be moving on to question 4. Question 4 again looks at both sources. It says, for this question, you need to refer to the whole of source A together with the whole of source B. Compare how the writers convey their different thoughts and feelings about camping experiences. Once again, as an examiner in this question, it is incredibly important to highlight or underline the focus. Pupils lose so many marks because they don't actually look at the focus of the question. This question builds in the skills that you've used for question 2 and the skills that you've used for question 3. It looks at language analysis, so again, semantic field, connotations, metaphor, simile, adjectives, verbs, etc. But it also looks at comparison. So how are those things, so semantic field, connotations, adjectives, what impression do they give in source A, and how is that similar or different to source B? And you are comparing the two. So comparative language, such as, on the other hand, differently, in this instance, etc., using those comparative discourse markers that you've used in lessons. Again, you would need to use evidence, you need to use the flashcode E, and you would need to use the flashcode WM, looking at writers' methods and analysing those writers' methods. This question should be the final part of the paper. It's worth 16 marks, and it should take you the last 20 minutes of the paper. Again, it is incredibly important to mention that for this paper, you should be writing the whole time. There is no time to have breaks whilst writing this paper. It is incredibly dense, especially considering you've got 2 extracts to look at and to analyse. You can do it though, you've had plenty of practice, and we and the English department all have loads of faith in you, so you can smash it. See you in the next one.